Hi, welcome to the video lab lesson for Module 4, where we're learning how to steam and poach. In this lab, we're going to make a couple of different recipes, and we'll be practicing both our steaming and our poaching techniques. As you'll recall from the pre-lab assignments, we learned that steaming and poaching are both moist heat preparations, and that the major difference is that when you're steaming, you are cooking the food on top of the water, so the evaporation of the water or steaming liquid is what's actually causing the cooking to take place. The food is held above that steam as it's released. And then in poaching, the food is submerged into the water and is surrounded by that hot liquid, and that complete surrounding of the food with that even temperature is what cooks the food gently when we're poaching. So today we're going to be making two different recipes. Actually three, but the first one that we're going to get started with is a poached pears in honey and spice. And this recipe is really delicious as both a dessert and also as a breakfast. And the way we're going to prepare it, we will use these Bartlett pears. You can use Bartlett or Bosc pears. You want them to be ripe but still firm. So we're going to be using these pears. We will also use 4 cups of water. We will use some honey, which adds flavor as well as sweetness. We're going to use some granulated sugar. And then the spice portion of this recipe comes from sliced ginger root, a whole cinnamon stick, a star anise pod, which we're going to break in half, and then 1 teaspoon of whole cloves. So this works together to make a very fragrant liquid that we will cook the pears in. Once the pears are cooked, we will transfer the pears as well as their poaching liquid into a container to cool down. And then what we're going to turn our attention to is making a homemade granola. And we're going to make this granola from 3 cups of rolled oats, a cup of sliced almonds. These are not roasted, just plain sliced almonds. We're going to use about 1/2 cup each of oil and sweetener. And in this application, I'm using coconut oil and I'm using honey. The honey in the granola will echo the honey flavoring in the poached pears. I like the flavor of coconut, which is why I'm choosing to use coconut oil here. It also has a high smoke point, and so it's good for cooking. We're going to be cooking this in the oven, so it's a good oil to use for that application. I'm also going to add some unsweetened coconut flakes to the granola, a little bit of salt and cinnamon, and then some raisins. And we'll add the raisins after the granola has cooked. So once the poached pears are completed, we will serve them as a pear with a dollop of plain yogurt and then some of our homemade granola on top. And it makes a really yummy dessert, like I mentioned, but also is a pretty great breakfast the next day as well. The nice thing about storing the poached pears in their liquid is that it continues to steep the pears and the flavor intensifies if you cool them down overnight. This is great for hosting because you can make it a couple days in advance and it can be quite impressive. So we're going to make the poached pears and granola and yogurt. That's one recipe. And then we're going to make this butternut squash soup. And the butternut squash, as you can see, we need about 3 pounds of butternut squash. So I'm actually using 2 of these smaller butternut squash to meet that requirement. You need 1 large shallot. These are pretty small, so I'm going to use 2 small shallots, 4 tablespoons of butter, 1/2 cup of heavy cream, a little bit of just 1 teaspoon of packed brown sugar, and a pinch of nutmeg. I've got those in there together. And the way we're going to cook this is by first steaming the butternut squash. And so we're going to use this handy steamer insert that will go down into our pot, and we will put the butternut squash here on top of the steamer, and it will cook that way first. And then we'll kind of use a flavored water to steam the butternut squash, and then that will become the base to our soup. So these are great recipes. They are relatively quick. They are simple, but they help us to master those techniques of poaching and steaming. So I'm looking forward to what we can get done in lab this week.